How to get the rare ones? Well, first thing we have to do in order to get the rare one is, what's a rare one? I think the spin-off to this is, well, a rare one, I don't have it, so it must be rare. That's the thinking. That's true. But I'm going to show you a place. There's a website called Clublog. This is how you get into it. You're into the Clublog website. You log in, and over here on the left-hand side, if you come down below the place where it says Tools, there's a band here that says Most Wanted. If you click on that, and what it does, this brings up a list, and this is a list, and this is for the whole world. This is the countries, DXCC entities that are the most wanted around the world. And you see here that number 1 is North Korea, Johnson Island, Curry Island, San Felix, Gujarat. Now that's for the whole world. Now, if you go back up to this tab up here where it says use the world log, if you tab onto it, it brings up this screen, this list. And if you come down here, oh, let me get back there. Pardon me. We're going to go down to the North America West Coast. And all of a sudden the list changes. Got to generate it right there. And guess what's number 1 for us? Turkestan. And then Kyrgyzstan, then Syria, and then North Korea. And you say, well, when's North Korea been on last? Well, if you come down to the tab that says North Korea and double click on it, it brings up another set of screens here, and it comes down and it actually shows you the recorded activity. And the last time that North Korea was on December of 2015. And you said, wow. And before that, there was some activity back in 2002. So this shows you there's not much activity. Unfortunately, I missed this one because I was county hunting at the time. But this is an interesting screen. That 2015, they showed the activity, and then you look at the number of contacts. They're only talking 439 contacts for the whole world. So now you know why North Korea is such a need.
I had 2 of them.
Jim, see, and I missed them because I was county hunting. But also Bill, AA7X in Boise, he did work them. So interesting little tidbit that we have. So now we know what countries we really want to pay attention on. When are they going to be active? When are they going to be activated? And there's places where you can actually come up with that. During our monthly SDXA meetings, we try and present the activities, stations that are going to be active in the month or so. You can go to DX newsletters. There's several. There's the DX, Daily DX. You got the DX World and DX News. We're going to go on to the DX World. And this is pretty typical of these sites. You'll see them powered by maybe a vendor, and they'll give you a breakdown of right up on the particular event that they were talking about. Like these here's the T31 TTT that's active right now by the Rebel Group. And then here's the V6D activity. So you can see it gives you a rundown. It's got a little screen over here on the right that it shows you the timelines that they're looking at. All these little tidbits. And of course you get the ads. They have to pay for the site and et cetera. So that's where you're seeing that. But if you tear into some of these, they give you a write-up underneath here. It tells you the dates they're looking at, what they're trying to accomplish. So that's a real good activity or place to go to look at what's going on. Okay, so we're going to get out of that. Now, there's also like I said, I mentioned there's others. There's this DX News, there's DX Zone. There's some ARRL bulletins that are published. You'll see them come up every week or so. Talk about DX, so what's going on. And some of it's duplication, some of it's not. So that's what you look at. Then we have the announced DX operations. That's the one we usually tab that we utilize for our monthly report. And we're going to come back to this later for tonight's activity down the meeting ways. So anyway, the other areas that you can pick up, well, what's going on is by word of mouth. You got some of these other clubs have their online meetings, and people attend those. And there's also some DX conventions, but they're becoming fewer and fewer, as we know. So once we've pretty well identified what is going on, one of the big benefits is to say, okay, I want to work this particular station. Now, the station we're going to be trying to look at tonight is, you got it, 3Y0K, even though they've already completed their operation. Their website was actually well done. It's got some key things as we as DXers need to be looking for. One, they got a plan. What are they going to try to accomplish? How many days are they going to operate? Are they going to be operating only FT8? Are they going to be operating all the other different modes? Yeah. Then the other side of the story is you start looking at, okay, who's going to be the operators? Are there only going to be one operator, two operators? Or are they going to have a whole smattering of operators, and what's their experience? And this is one of the key things I think that's missed by a lot of people, is when you start looking at the number of operators, who of them have the certain skills that they need to really operate? Now, point in case, how many new CW operators do you see today compared to what we had in the past? And so if you're a CW operator, you want to make sure that they got that pretty well covered with some of these guys that got that skill set. That's part of the reason why a lot of these new the expeditions that are out there today, they run FT8. Why? Because they don't have to know the language, and two, they don't have to worry about how to handle a paddle or a key or a keyboard necessarily. So those are some of the things going on there. The other thing that's on these websites that becomes really invaluable is they give you the game plan, they tell you what frequencies they're going to be operating. So if they're going to be operating only between these two parts of the band, then that's where you're going to pay attention. And the other thing that kind of spins off onto it is they give it a little rundown. Notice on here that it says it's going to be operating CW, Sideband, and FT8, but no FT4. Now that's good to know, because that way you know that I don't waste my time on FT4, because they're not going to be there. They're going to be on FT8. Now, the other thing, even with FT8, you have to watch the footnotes down in here. For FT8 mode, use only the specified frequencies and Foxhound mode. Foxhound mode. That's important. So that gets you set up. So now we got the expedition coming out. We know what the plan is. We know what their antennas are. We know what their equipment is. That's pretty well spilled out just a little further on down here. They actually break down what their equipment was. Right here. All you ICOM guys, you like this. They're running 12 ICOM 7610s, four ICOM 7300s. But what's ironic is, okay, they're running the ICOMs there, but then you go further on down and you find that they're using the AHAM amplifiers. So you may have to dig into it a little bit. There's their landing permits. And there's their operator, there's the stations, so they're on their team members. And the support staff. That's so critical. And then there's the pilots. Now, what does a pilot do? This is probably one of the most confusing part. people say, well, I want to set a schedule up to work them on this frequency at this time. I'll send a message to my pilot. That's not what their purpose is. Their purpose is more listening to the bitches and passing that along to them. So, you know, we've had several operations here recently where our window for long path and gray line was just about the time that they were starting to they had an opening towards Europe. The team was made of European operators. So what do you think they concentrated on? Europe. And that I saw that last couple of months several times. So that's part of the thing that you're dealing with there. Real challenge from that end of it. And okay, and here's the ACOM, the list of the ACOM amplifiers that they're going to be utilizing. So that really starts to foot the footprint for you. Now that we've identified, okay, what their operations, is this something I want to devote some time to? So what you have to end up doing is you look at the dates that they're talking about operating, and here's one of the big questions you have to ask. Will I be available and have time to chase this one? And I think that that's something we get so tied up in today's world we don't even think about it. But if you're really chasing these guys seriously, you have to be serious. You have to devote some time to it. Well, here's one that I wrote this down in here for a reason. Will other DXCCs be activated and competing for the bandwidth at the same time? I have seen this probably in the last 3 months more times than not, where we got different DXCCs being activated at the same time, and they're overlapping into the same frequencies. Point in case, you go up onto 15 meters, FT8, and you'll find, okay, 21074 is the watering hole. All the DX stations go up to 091. All of a sudden, I'm hearing the same station on 091 besides the watering hole, and he's on top of another DXCC, S21. As a matter of fact, he's on top of them. I just couldn't believe it. So there's a little courtesy there that was a little missing. Anyway, we talked about the number of operators, the experience, and then what's their schedule going to be, and what their proposed antennas. Now, once we've identified, I'm going to try and work this guy. Which way do I point my antenna? If I have a Yagi, or do I have antennas that support that path? And that's one of the things, even in Beauvais, for me, my 40-meter extended double ZEP, by the time I looked at my pattern, and into the Beauvais area, I actually was down on the pattern quite a bit. I got through, but that was more of a case you had to be really listening what was going on. Now, the next question is, when do I want to listen? And we go into, this is a program that you can access on the internet called VOCAP, V-O-C-A-P. K6TU also provides this service. This one's free, which is neat because you can sit there and look at what's going on. With the screen, you have a place here for putting your transmitting and your receiving. Now, what I like to do is, okay, I want to make sure those guys can hear me. So if I'm going to try and work Beauvais from here, I'm going to need to get my location into this tab up here. Now, there are 3 ways to do this. You can put a grid in, like mine's DN17NR, or you can put lat long, or you can come down to this pull down menu, and you aren't going to believe this, down towards the bottom here, in the W's, it has Spokane, Washington. And so we got Spokane, Washington. Now, I'm going to try and see, well, how well would I be doing to Beauvais? Okay, and Beauvais is right there. So, okay, we got the locations, and if you look at the map, we'll have to pull the map up. See, there they are. This is where we're going. There's Beauvais, and this is where we're at here. Then we have to go over here on the right and to identify, okay, what mode are we going to operate in? I'll be running CW, and I typically run about 200 watts. So I'm down in this area here. Now, one of the things that I didn't pull up on that Beauvais website is that they give you a rundown of what their antennas are. And this is important because what you have to do is identify your antennas. Like in my case, I'll be transmitting to them. So I'd have to go through and indicate, am I running dipoles or am I using my stepper antenna, and change those. Well, at the same time for them, we'd have to figure out, okay, what are the antennas would they be using? Fortunately, what you can do, we're going to go down and use the, at Beauvais, they do use, one of the options at the very top here is a VDA. It's a vertical dipole arrangement that typically the expeditions like to use around saltwater. So go ahead and click on that. And then what you can do is, over here on the right, there's a little click point. If you click on that, it changes them all to the VDA. It speeds that whole process up. So then once you have this, okay, I want to see how well is this going to work out. Well, there's a couple of different things that they do. They have this they call propagation charts. I'll show you what it looks like. It's got all these little squiggly lines in here. It varies by band. I don't care for that one. I go down to the cap wheel, and with the cap wheel, it shows you what the possibility that you're going to make contact. Like in my case, on 40 meters, see this is by bands right here, so they got the bands up in here. Here's 80, 60, 40. On 40, I actually work them at 0600, right in this area here. So it's not at the peak, you know, the real dark colors is when you get the best propagation from this valuation. This one here said, okay, I did okay. But that's where we're at with there. Then on 15, which is this, on this band right here, 15, I worked them at 1539 or 1439, which puts it right in here in the blue, which is a little bit higher up on the food chain. So here's the food chain. See, blue is at 10%, the red is at 100%, and we've got these 50, 60% in the middle. So it gives you a pretty good idea. So this is the part you can do it. One of the things while we got this up that's really interesting is that you can actually, we're looking at the gray line. And one of the nice tabs about this program here, you can change, this time right now is 0256 Zulu. If you change that time, it moves it over so you can see what the gray line looks like. Starts to give you the picture, so well, are we going to have a decent path or not? So these are some of the things that you can benefit from dealing into it. So this is with vocap. This actually came off of the Voice of America. It's already been mentioned, some of the VE7CC and some of the other websites where you can actually monitor where they're operating. I'm not going to get into that, but now I'm going to talk about now it's time for you to get to operate. Let's talk about CW. CW is, it's been around forever. Typically, the station would be on one frequency and they would be listening up. With the new modern radios, it's really handy. You'd have two VFOs and you'd be listening on one channel on here, down where listening to their signal, and the other channel you would be running up and down trying to figure out who they calling, who they're working. So you know what their frequency were, where you wanted to transmit at. Neat thing. Now in the old days, well, I shouldn't say older days, just before some of the SDRs, we had a program from VE3 NEA that calls CW skimmer. There's also an RTTY skimmer, but this is the CW skimmer. And what it does, it actually decodes the calls across the spectrum, and it shows you the frequency here and then their calls. And so the station that was being activated was down in this area here. And who did he work? Well, look what shows up right here. W6XA just sent 599. Guess where he's listening? He's listening on that frequency. And so what you would do is you would click on that frequency, your radio would jump right to that frequency, you can call him, make contact. Really handy. Sideband, similar type of thing, you're doing split. Now let's talk about FT8. This is a whole different critter. When you're running FT8, one of the first things you have to know is what version of FT8 are they running? The problem is you got FT8, you got the Foxhound, you got Super Fox, you got MSHV, you got Q65, you got JT65. There's that tendency right now, particularly by the Europeans, they like the MSHV. Now what that does is they transmit at one frequency and they listen to the whole spectrum and you don't have to move. While with Foxhound, you have to be above 1,000 hertz for them to hear you. And it's a different rules. So that's very important. It'll get you through that. So we speed through that. When it comes to the digital, the game plans are just a little bit different. And the other thing I find personally, because I don't run high power necessarily on the digitals, that if the station, any station nearby, they're going to cover you up. And I've seen that time and time again. And it's really mind-boggling. One of the things that I like to do is that when I come up onto a station I want to try and work, I want to figure out where's he listening. And that's been a challenge because they could be listening at the high end, low end. For our protocol, you might say, we would start at up around 2,500 hertz listening and transmitting up there and listening for them down below. But as I do that, I also would take a cycle or two and listen and have the computer print out, what frequency are all the stations at. And then I would see, well, who did he just work? And then I scroll back up and see, well, what frequency was he out on that one there? And I found that more times than not, if I move back to that frequency, I'd eventually get through. However, again, it's trying to figure out, where's the hole, especially on the big heavy DX stations. Okay, now I'm going to tell you, there's a software package that just recently was informed of. Murph ran across this. It's called QSO Predictor. Now what it does is I'm just going to read this to you a little bit so you get an idea for the feel for it. What it does, it takes the PSK reporter's MQTT stream and builds a band map from the target's perspective. In other words, from the DX station's perspective. What's he seeing? Is there any holes there? And so that's how this works, and uses their spots, nearby stations in the proximity, and then double clicks. And so it brings up a list here. You can see this, but it gives you the spectrum here, and it also shows you, hey, here's an opening right there. And you go back up into it and click on that, and that's where you'd want to transmit at. Because it's got to be a place where can they hear you? And especially if we're not running super big power, that's a challenge. So this is a new package, new program. As I've played with it, what I've discovered is I've had to learn a lot about multicast and unicast, and I have some problems with my VPN with it. And it's also, when I read into it, some of the people were saying that it's also a memory hog. So you have to understand it may slow your machine down a little bit. So those are little FYIs. Good package, something to deal with. And this is just the new tools now that are coming out. Now, I want to talk, my last part I want to talk about is a little bit, you're hearing about all these guys that are running remote for good reasons. When you have In my case, I've got a lot of QRM in places I used to never have stuff, and it's a real challenge. But I do a lot of trafficking nets on 80 meters or 75. And what we have is a situation where being in North Idaho, I could not copy Southern Idaho during the summer times. And so what a bunch of the guys pointed out to me is that they go into this website called North Utah SDR and would hook up with it, and in turn, let's see if I can find it here. Essentially what it does is like a receiver at that location, and you could hear all the other people that are checking into the net and where you wanted to pass traffic to. We could do that. In fact, our net manager is from Minnesota, and how she gets in, she links into the SDR system out of Utah. Really cool. New tools that are available. They're a different approach to things in today's world. I have a daughter in the Air Force, and we were back east visiting her, and I spent some time doing some mobile work back there, typical county hunter. But I also was working some DX, and what I just started to say, well, what's their wall like back here? Because I didn't have a clue. And what I discovered is, when I started linking into some of these remote sites over the last few months, is that they have the same problems that we have, but they've got a different problem. Their problem is that their QRM is coming from Europe, it's coming from the Caribbean, besides all the clowns up and down the East Coast. And when it comes to working the rare DX ones, you think it's just a piece of cake back there. It's not. You've got to really work at it. And I know I've talked to a couple of my friends in the DC area, and they said sometimes it's almost unbearable because the fours out of Florida are just zapping the stations great, but you can't get through. So just imagine what the nines feel like. So that's what I have to bring tonight. All I can say is, if you can't be heard, I'll read this last thing here. Fancy radios are nice, but in the end, understanding propagation, knowing the particulars of the DX station, and your transmit capabilities is all that counts. Oh, are we being heard?